أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. So we stopped previously at the raising of the foundations by Ibrahim and Ismail alayhim as-salam at the Kaaba, and how this may represent the foundations of the deen that we currently know and love today. One thing I forgot to mention was that the foundations were actually laid by Adam alayhi salam, and that the intricacies of the deen and how it has changed over time with new prophets and new people may also be highlighted here through the phases of the building of the house of Allah. We also spoke about the extending of a hand to the people of the book, inviting them to come to Islam, and that we will all be held accountable for our own actions and will not be asked about the actions of a previous nation. So it's for us to do our own deeds and to build upon what Allah made available for us through their lives and their prayers. Wallahu alam. سيقول السفهاء من الناس ما ولاهم عن قبلتهم التي كانوا عليها. The fools from amongst the people will say, what turned them away from their direction of prayer that they were on? قل لله المشرق والمغرب. Say, for Allah is the east and the west. يهدي من يشاء إلى صراط مستقيم. He guides whom He wills to a straight path. So for this section of the surah, some context may be useful. The believers at the time, the initial Qibla was al-Masjid al-Aqsa, which is located in Palestine. And then after the commands of Allah came, the Qibla was changed from Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa to Al-Masjid Al-Haram, which is in Mecca in Saudi Arabia, and it's where the Kaaba is. So we see, say for Allah is the east and the west. And we've seen this used previously in the ayah, وَلِلَّهِ الْمَشْرِقُ وَالْمَغْرِبُ فَأَيْنَمَا تَوَلَّوْا فَثَمَّ وَجْهِ اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَاسِعٌ عَلِيمٌ. And for Allah is the east and the west, so wherever you turn, then the entirety of Allah is. Indeed, Allah is all-encompassing, all-knowing. We see this ayah mentioned after the people of the book do not defend the place of worship of Allah, and this could be interpreted as it not being a condition upon our connection with Allah for there to be a place of worship. يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. Allah guides whom He wills to a straight path. So if Allah has given a command, then this command is the easiest way to obtain the pleasure of Allah, and you could say it's the easiest way to get from point A, which you are currently at, to point B, where Allah wants you to be, and this is the straight path. So we see this is what the fools of the people will ask, what turned them away from their direction of prayer. And the answer to this is, first, that it is not necessary for there to be a direction of prayer for one to have a connection with Allah, and second, that Allah guides whom He wills to His straight path, which is the way that is easiest for our connection with Him. Wallahu alam. وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ وَيَكُونَ الرَّسُولُ عَلَيْكُمْ شَهِيدًا. And in this way we have made you a middle nation, or a nation of the middle way, to be witnesses over the people and for the Prophet to be a witness over you. So to be a middle nation means to be a people that are moderate, to be not too much to any extreme, neither to the left side or the right side. And this is for us to be witnesses over people, meaning our example was there, people could join, and it is there for people to see. And also the believers have lived. They have lived by the way that Allah has advised, they have lived by the guidance Allah has given, and they have been a very moderate and middle example for people to follow. وَيَكُونَ الرَّسُولُ عَلَيْكُمْ شَهِيدًا. And so that the Prophet may be a witness over the people. We follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. We read about him in the ahadith, and his sunan, his way of life, is something to be strived towards, a type of way for a person to try to live. So the Prophet was the example for the believers, and the believers are an example for the remaining people. Even more so than this, the Prophet ﷺ is a figure of authority for the believers as well. He is the one who bridges the gap between the people and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of revelation being received. And we see an example of this in ayahs 137 to 139. فَإِنْ آمَنُوا بِمِثْلِ مَا آمَنْتُمْ بِهِ فَقَدْ اهْتَدُوا. So if they believe in similar to what you believe in, then they have become guided. وَإِنْ تَوَلَّوْا فَإِنَّمَا هُمْ فِي شِقَاقٍ. And if they turn away, then indeed they are in dissension or indecision. So here the believers are being used as a reference point, and their example is present. صِبْغَةَ اللَّهِ وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ مِنَ اللَّهِ صِبْغَةً. The colouring of Allah, and who is better than Allah in colouring. وَنَحْنُ لَهُ عَابِدُونَ. And we are to Him worshippers. Once again, the example of the believers is here, and that they are worshippers of Allah. قُلْ أَتُحَجُّونَنَا فِي اللَّهِ وَهُوَ رَبُّنَا وَرَبُّكُمْ وَلَنَا أَعْمَالُنَا وَلَكُمْ أَعْمَالُكُمْ وَنَحْنُ لَهُ مُخْلِصُونَ. And here we see an example of the Prophet being a witness over the believers, and then the chain which follows, the believers being witnesses over the remaining people. So the Prophet is instructed to say, do you argue with us in Allah? And He is our Lord and your Lord. So the our shows the plural, showing that the Prophet is the figure of authority for the believers, speaking for the believers. وَلَنَا أَعْمَالَنَا وَلَكُمْ أَعْمَالُكُمْ, and for us are our deeds and for you are your deeds. وَنَحْنُ لَهُ مُخْلِصُونَ, and we are to him devoted. So the figure of authority, the Prophet ﷺ, he speaks for the people, and his example is there, followed by the example of the believers as a way to the straight path of Allah. Wallahu a'lam. وما جعلنا القبلة التي كنت عليها إلا لنعلم من يتبع الرسول ممن ينقلب على عقبيه. And we did not make the direction of prayer that you were on, except so that we may know who will follow the Prophet from the one who will turn back on his heels. So this ordeal of the Qibla being changed, the direction of prayer being changed from Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa to Al-Masjid Al-Haram, the reasoning behind it has been detailed. إِلَّا لِنَعْلَمْ, except so that we may know. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already knows everything. However, the Quran has been made available for all of mankind for all of time. Let's say me, for example, I'm a very, very, very small piece in the creation of Allah, and my significance is very small. However, through these ayahs, I have come to know, bi'idhnillah, by the permission of Allah, as does every person who reads the Quran, that there were those who followed the Prophet and there were those who turned back on their heels. And we see Lanalam is a plural as well. And through this, we learn a lesson also, which we'll get into later, inshallah. وَإِن كَانَتْ لَكَبِيرَةً إِلَّا عَلَى الَّذِينَ هَدَى اللَّهُ. And indeed it was a great thing, except for on those Allah had guided. وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُضِيعَ إِيمَانَكُمْ. And it was not for Allah to lose or let go, to waste your faith. إِنَّ اللَّهَ بِالنَّاسِ لَرَؤُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. Indeed Allah is with the people, the most kind, the most merciful. So here we see some reasoning, and Allahu A'lam, it may be so that a person does not misunderstand this ordeal or trial. This is not for Allah to let go to waste the faith of the believers or to lose the faith of the believers. And we are given reassurance. Indeed, Allah is with the people, the most kind, the most merciful. Sometimes we may look to the one who provides the most for us, and then a person may think he is capable of providing this. However, I've been faced with difficulties and afflictions, and it may take a person to some negative thoughts. Allah is all merciful, all kind. Allah is also all wise. And his wisdom means that though we may not comprehend the reasoning behind certain trials and afflictions, it is in our best interest if we seek the advice that he gives, if we operate based on the guidance he has given. You can imagine the most kind and most merciful person in the world, and subhanAllah, they are absolutely nowhere near the mercy of Allah. They are creation of the most merciful. قَدْ نَرَى تَقَلُّبَ وَجْهِكَ فِي السَّمَاءِ. Indeed, we see the turning of your entirety in the heavens. So تَقَلُّبَ وَجْهِكَ could be referring to the Prophet's uneasiness regarding the situation and regarding also the original Qibla that he was on. Wallahu a'lam. فَلْنُوَلِّيَنَّكَ قِبْلَةً تَرْضَاهَا. So we will turn you to a direction of prayer that pleases you or that makes you happy. Now I also want to point out that in this particular ayah, the word Qibla has been used, direction of prayer, and we're going to see some ayahs coming up inshallah that have similar meaning. However, the word Qibla, which is a directional word, it's a word that's difficult to interpret other than in this context, used in this particular ayah. فَوَلِّ وَجْهَكَ شَطْرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ. So turn yourself in the direction of Al-Masjid Al-Haram. وَحَيْثُ مَا كُنْتُمْ فَوَلُّوا وَجُوهَكُمْ شَطْرَهُ. And from wherever you were, then turn yourselves towards it. Once again, wajh can mean face. However, in this context, I would say it means a person's entirety. So that person would turn themselves, no hesitation, no questioning, wholeheartedly. So we see the Prophet is addressed first, and then the believers. وَإِنَّ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ لِيَعْلَمُونَ أَنَّهُ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّهِمْ. And indeed, the ones who were given the book, then they know that it is the truth from their Lord. And now we see people outside of the Prophet and believers mentioned. These are the people of the book, and in terms of the context of some of the earlier ayahs, we see that these are the people that the Prophet and then the believers should serve as an example for. So they know that it is the truth from their Lord, and it is detailed in previous scriptures. First, the story of Ibrahim and Ismail alayhim salam, and the Masjid al-Haram and the Kaaba are a holy site, and that a prophet is to come from amongst these people. So they know it's the truth from their Lord. وَمَا اللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا يَعْمَلُونَ. And Allah is not unaware of what they do. So regarding this information, have they chosen to reveal or conceal it? Have they chosen to tamper with it? Have they chosen to discard it and ignore it altogether? Allahu a'lam. وَلَئِنْ آتَيْتَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ بِكُلِّ آيَةٍ مَا تَبَعُوا قِبْلَتَكَ. And if you gave to the people who were given the book of every sign, they would not follow your direction of prayer. وَمَا أَنْتَ بِتَابِعٍ قِبْلَتَهُمْ. And you will not follow their direction of prayer. وَمَا بَعْضُهُمْ بِتَابِعٍ قِبْلَةَ بَعْضٍ. and some of them will not follow the direction of prayer of others of them. So we've seen, first, if they are given of every sign, they will not follow the direction of prayer of the Prophet. And the Prophet ﷺ will not follow their direction of prayer because this is not what has been instructed by Allah. And some of them will not follow the direction of prayer of others of them because, as we have seen before, the Christian people said the Jewish people have nothing to stand on, and the Jewish people said the Christian people have nothing to stand on, so they have no common ground. وَلَئِنِ اتَّبَعْتَ أَهْوَاءَهُم مِّن بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَكَ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ إِنَّكَ إِذًا لَمِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. And if you follow their desires after what came to you of the knowledge, indeed you are of the wrongdoers. So we see that it is described as desires. Their beliefs are not rooted in knowledge. Their beliefs are not rooted in truth from Allah. Therefore, they are desires. It is detailed after what has come to you of the knowledge. So the Prophet ﷺ has received direct revelation from Allah, which supersedes the desires of people of previous nations. And then we see guidance for the Prophet ﷺ, إِنَّكَ إِذًا لَمِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ, then you would be of the wrongdoers. الَّذِينَ آتَيْنَاهُمَ الْكِتَابَ يَعْرِفُونَهُ كَمَا يَعْرِفُونَ أَبْنَاءَهُم. Those we have given to them the book, they know it as they know their children. وَإِنَّ فَرِيقًا مِّنْهُمْ لِيَكْتُمُونَ الْحَقَّ وَهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ. And indeed a group of them conceal the truth whilst they know. So we see آتَيْنَاهُمَ الْكِتَابَ, we have given them the book. So Allah has made information available and guidance available for them. And they know it as they know their children. They know this very, very well. And then a group of them decide to conceal the truth, and not through accidents or mistakes, whilst they are completely aware of this. And then we see further guidance for the Prophet ﷺ, الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكَ فَلَا تَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْمُمْتَرِينَ. The truth from your Lord, so do not be of the doubters. And also we can see this as reassurance for the Prophet as well. This is a very difficult situation. There are lots of external pressures, and being a prophet is not an easy task. There are many people counting on the Prophet ﷺ. There are many people counting on his authority, on his next instruction. And some of the believers also have ideas, some of them have beliefs and desires, wallahu alam, and all of these things come into play. The Prophet is not just speaking for himself, he's also speaking for the believers. وَلِكُلٍّ وِجْهَةٌ هُوَ مُوَلِّيهَا. And for everyone there is a direction that they turn towards. So we've seen in a previous ayah, we see Qibla used. In this ayah we do not see Qibla, however we see Wijha, which is a direction. And then we see the guidance or advice given after this. فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ. So race to the good deeds. So through this we can infer that this Wijha, this direction, is an internal direction, as the advice given and the guidance given is to race towards good deeds, a form of purification, a form of developing a connection with Allah, Allahu A'lam. And then we see a reminder, أَيْنَمَا تَكُونُوا يَأْتِ بِكُمُ اللَّهُ جَمِيعًا. Wherever you all will be, Allah will bring you all together. This may be in reference to Judgment Day. إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. Indeed, Allah is over everything capable. وَمِنْ حَيْثُ خَرَجْتَ فَوَلِّ وَجْهَكَ شَطْرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ وَإِنَّهُ لِلْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكَ. And from where you come out, then turn yourself to the direction of al-Masjid al-Haram. Here the Prophet ﷺ is addressed. And from where you come out may be in reference to this situation. So all these external pressures and ideas and desires from the believers and from the non-believers and from all these people is currently happening. The Prophet ﷺ is facing all these things. So we see the initial فَوَلِّ وَجْهَكَ شَطْرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ in ayah 144, and this is an instruction. And then once again in ayah 149, وَمِنْ حَيْثُ خَرَجْتَ فَوَلِّ وَجْهَكَ شَطْرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ. And from wherever you come out of, then turn yourself in the direction of al-Masjid al-Haram. So wherever you come out of this situation, turn yourself in that direction. The instruction has not changed. وَإِنَّهُ لِلْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكَ. And indeed it is the truth from your Lord. وَمَا اللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ. And Allah is not unaware of what you do. So one thing I also want to point out is we see this, if we go back to ayah 144, we see the Prophet ﷺ is uneasy. Then Allah blesses him with a Qibla that makes him happy. And then he's instructed to turn himself to al-Masjid al-Haram. And then the believers are instructed to turn themselves towards it. And then those who were given the book from before know that it's the truth from their Lord. So these people are also mentioned and addressed. And then we see the ending of the ayah, وَمَا اللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا يَعْمَلُونَ. Meaning that there is some impurity in the way that they have dealt with this, referring to the people of the book. And then we see a similar ending in this ayah. The Prophet is addressed, we see reassurance, it is the truth from his Lord, and then we see وَمَا اللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ. And Allah is not unaware of what you do. Ta'malun is a plural word, meaning the Prophet ﷺ and the believers. Now the Prophet ﷺ, as we mentioned before, is an authority or a figure of authority for the believers. So if the believers cause an issue or make things difficult or disobey in certain ways, the Prophet ﷺ also deals with it. And the Prophet ﷺ is the first person addressed. And subhanAllah, through these ayahs you do get a little insight into how hard the job of the Prophet ﷺ actually was. He was not just responsible for himself as we all are. We are all just responsible for ourselves. In a way, he was responsible for the rebuilding or reasserting of the deen during his time. And we see how he was guided by Allah through all of this in the revelation of the Quran. وَمِنْ حَيْثُ خَرَجْتَ فَوَلِّ وَجْهَكَ شَطْرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ وَحَيْثُ مَا كُنْتُمْ فَوَلُّوا وُجُوهَكُمْ شَطْرَهُ لِأَلَّا يَكُونُ لِلنَّاسِ عَلَيْكُمْ حُجَّةٌ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا مِنْهُمْ. And from where you came out, then turn yourself in the direction of the Masjid al-Haram. And from where you were, this is a plural by the way, so where you all were could also work. فَوَلُّوا وُجُوهَكُمْ شَطْرَهُ. Then turn yourselves in its direction. لَأَلَّا يَكُونُ لِلنَّاسِ عَلَيْكُمْ حُجَّةٌ. So that there is not for the people over you an argument, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا, except for the ones who were wrongdoers, minhum, of them. فَلَا تَخْشَوْهُمْ وَخْشَوْنِي. And do not fear them and fear me. Here Allah is addressing the people. وَلِأُتِمَّ نِعْمَتِي عَلَيْكُمْ وَلَعَلَّكُمْ تَهْتَدُونَ. So that I may complete my favor or my blessing upon you or over you, and so that you may become guided. We see in the previous ayah the Prophet ﷺ is addressed as a figure of authority. Then we see a second addressing of the Prophet ﷺ, followed by an addressing of the believers, and then a reasoning behind why, so that the people may not have an argument over them, except for the ones who are wrongdoers, so the ones who refuse to see the truth and who would rather blatantly lie. However, we see the truth is available. So once again, we see the theme of the Prophet ﷺ being a witness over the believers, and the believers being witnesses over the remaining people. And then we see فَلَا تَخْشَوْهُمْ وَخْشَوْنِي. Allah addresses the Prophet and the believers. Do not fear them and fear him. وَلِأُتِمَّ نِعْمَتِي عَلَيْكُمْ. And then we see a reasoning, so that he may complete his blessing over us. وَلَعَلَّكُمْ تَهْتَدُونَ. And so that we may become guided. Now, even when a person reads through these ayahs 1,446, I think it is, years later, they are still, first of all, not just relevant, they are still the same level of guidance as they were at that time, and they will still remain the same level of guidance for people that will come in 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years, Allahu A'lam, until the day of judgment. It's not for people to look at these ayahs and say, well, these ayahs were revealed 1,400 years ago, they do not concern me now. Or I will look into these ayahs and I will find what can work with the society of today. Because subhanAllah, if Allah reveals something from himself, it will always be present. It will always be relevant. And for a person to feel as though they need to put in levels of work and omit certain things and emphasize certain things for it to become relevant in today's society, then they have discounted of the wisdom of Allah. كما أرسلنا فيكم رسولا منكم يتلو عليكم آياتنا ويزكيكم ويعلمكم الكتاب والحكمة ويعلمكم ما لم تكونوا تعلمون. As we sent from within you a prophet from amongst you to recite over you our verses and to purify you and to teach you of the book or the laws and the wisdom and to teach you what you did not know. So we see the Prophet addressed, then we see the believers addressed, then we see how it holds up in relation to the remaining people, then we see the advice of not fearing the people but fearing Allah, then we see the reasoning of the blessing of Allah being completed over us and so that we may be guided. And this is as Allah has sent within us a prophet from amongst us. If we look back to the prayer made in the dua made in ayah 129, رَبَّنَا وَبَعْثْ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِكَ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. Our Lord, and send from within them a prophet from amongst them to recite over them of your verses and to teach them of the book or the laws and the wisdom and to purify them. Indeed, you are the Almighty, All-Wise. So in this ayah we see يَتْلُو عَلَيْكُمْ آيَاتِنَا, to recite over you our verses, وَيُزَكِّيكُمْ وَيُعَلِّمُكُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ, and to purify you and to teach you of the books or the laws and the wisdom. So we see the order of these two things switched around. In the dua we see purification come after the teaching of the laws and the book and the wisdom. However, in the actual transpiring of events, we see that purification comes before the teaching of the book and wisdom. And we see that this purification has come in the form of a trial or an ordeal, which we have seen detailed in the ayahs that have come before this. So we see the reassurance from Allah come earlier on in the ayahs. وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُضِيعَ إِيمَانَكُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ بِالنَّاسِ لَرَءُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. It was not for Allah to lose or make go to waste your faith. Indeed, Allah is with the people, the most kind, most merciful. فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرَكُمْ وَاشْكُرُوا لِي وَلَا تَكْفُرُونَ. So mention me, I will mention you, and give thanks to me, and do not disbelieve. So first of all, we see that a relationship with Allah is two ways. We mention Allah, Allah mentions us. And the ways in which we mention Allah are not solely through dhikr or through glorifying and praising. They are also through remembering Him in our lives and in what we want for others. So we see Ibrahim and Ismail make a dua, they make a prayer, and through this prayer we see that what they want for their descendants is a connection with Allah, for them to know Allah, to worship Him, and for them to be taught of Him. And then we see after it has been detailed that they are a nation and we are a nation, this prayer comes into fruition, and that we get a prophet from amongst us, and he recites over us the scriptures of Allah, and we are purified by Allah through the means of trials and ordeals, and we are taught of the book and the laws and the wisdom. So the ways that we mention Allah are vast and, subhanallah, very varied, and Allah mentions us in ways that are, subhanallah, better. And another thing I wanted to mention is in a Sahih hadith, it says that the Prophet ﷺ advised that the people say after the adhan, اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت سيدنا محمد الوسيلة والفضيلة وبعثه المقام المحمود الذي وعدته. And in this we pray that the Prophet ﷺ gets a special place in paradise, and it's called al-wasila. Now, is his getting this place in paradise reliant on our dua? It's not, because this was promised by Allah. However, we have been given the opportunity to align ourselves with this sentiment, and through this show that we are believers and aligned with the same thing. This is what we want for our Prophet. We recognize what he did. We recognize that Allah will give him this. So mentioning is a massive thing in the Quran. So فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرُكُمْ وَاشْكُرُوا لِي وَلَا تَكْفُرُونَ, and give thanks to me and do not disbelieve. So we see our connection with Allah, our two-way connection with Allah, and that we must give thanks for what we are given, and that we must not disbelieve.